Hello and welcome back to your Pennsylvania Dutch Minute. Another viewer request. I got a great question from someone in my email inbox this week, and it was a grammar question. This gentleman had started using my the other series of videos that I do with my PA Dutch 101 website that focus purely on grammar and seriously digging into the language to learn. And he noticed there was he noticed something about the way we use definite articles in regards to names. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this in this video series or not, but in Pennsylvania Dutch we do something that's a little different from in English. We essentially say something like, I know the John. We would literally say the John. So his question was, do we always use that the in front of the name? Can we disregard it? I guess in some of my videos on that grammar section, sometimes I used the, sometimes I didn't. And he was just wondering, was that a mistake on my part, or is that something you can do? And it's a good topic, so let's address it. So throwback to an earlier grammar video. Hopefully you remember that we do have articles in Pennsylvania Dutch. Remember, there's two kinds. There's the definite articles, which are the ways of saying the word the, and we know that in Pennsylvania Dutch it's more than one way. And then we have the indefinite articles. Those are words like a or an. So we're dealing only with definite articles in this video. And the only two we really need to concentrate on today is the one for masculine and the one for feminine. So if we don't remember, here you go. The masculine is der, sometimes pronounced as da, depending who your Pennsylvania Dutch speaker is, either der or da. And the feminine is die, not die, not die. Get out of your English thinking mindset, die, okay? And when we use these with names, if it's a masculine name, then we use the masculine article. If it's a feminine name, we use the feminine article. So for example, let's use the names John and Mary. We're going to use those throughout this whole list today, this whole video. So it's da John and die Mary. Okay, the John and the Mary, they both mean the, and that sounds weird in English because we wouldn't necessarily ever say that, but that's what we do in Pennsylvania Dutch, or that's what can be done in Pennsylvania Dutch, and we'll talk more about that as the video goes on. But just to show you how these work, or how it works in Pennsylvania Dutch, I have a sentence and a question, and then a response. We'll talk about that. So let's look at this first one. Here's the sentence. When I'm using both John or Mary, we can swap them out. Ich kenn der John or die Mary gut. Ich kenn der John gut. Ich kenn die Mary gut. Which translates, I know John or Mary well. I know them. Okay. So here we have the da and the die there. Ich kenn der John gut. Ich kenn die Mary gut. That doesn't sound weird to a Pennsylvania Dutch speaker that you're saying literally, I know the John and I know the Mary well. That's what we do. Okay. Here's an example of one in a question. If we ask the question, Wuhnt der John in Bernville? Wuhnt der John in Bernville? Does John live in Bernville? Again, we're having that da there, that der, meaning does the John live in Bernville? That's how it works. We could swap out der John for die Mary as well, of course. Here's an example where someone asks a question and you respond, and this is typical what a Pennsylvania Dutchman might say. So imagine you're standing there with a friend and you point over to somebody and you say, where is Sel? Who is that? Where is Sel? And the response would be, I, Sel is die Mary. Oh, that is the Mary, or that's Mary. Again, in English we would never say the, but in Pennsylvania Dutch we can. I, Sel is die Mary. That's what you'd hear, or I, Sel is der John. So the question then comes this, and this is what was at the real heart of this whole point of his email was, can we leave the article out? Can we do it in English? Can we do it in Pennsylvania Dutch too? And my response is going to be, and maybe somebody out there that's a grammar purist might say, absolutely not. We have to leave the article in there because that's what you do in Pennsylvania Dutch. I'm going to say, languages are living things. They change over time. And I've made this point a lot in other videos. The Amish speakers of Pennsylvania Dutch, their version of Pennsylvania Dutch is constantly evolving. It's changed. It's different from the Pennsylvania Dutch that I spoke, or that I speak, excuse me, or that other non-sectarian Pennsylvania Dutch like me and my family, those who are the church Dutch or the what we call a fancy Dutch, all these different terms that are out there. Our language hasn't really bent and moved that much. But among the Amish and among old order Mennonite speakers and other Mennonite speakers, it has changed. For example, we've talked about the dative case before in these videos. The non-Amish still maintain the dative case. I do. When I speak Pennsylvania Dutch, I'm using the dative. I use the dative. Modern day Amish speakers do not. They've dropped the dative. Now grammatically that's totally crazy because our grammar tells us the dative has to be there. It exists. But those speakers aren't using it anymore. And also the case with word order. There are strict rules, quote unquote, rules, grammar rules, that word order is a specific, words have to be in a specific order in Pennsylvania Dutch. And I've done videos about this before. But when you run into some modern day Amish speakers, the word order that they're using isn't always the grammatically correct form. Now, does that make them wrong and make them bad speakers of the language? No, that's how they speak. So the language is there, the language has changed. This is how they speak it now. That doesn't make the old version or what I'm teaching you guys, the older version, wrong either. Languages bend. English changes too. There are certain phrases and words that we have adopted within the last couple of years. English changes all the time, specifically with the internet, and language changes, and what's accepted and what becomes usage is up to society. Same thing with Pennsylvania Dutch. So that was kind of I got on my soapbox a little bit there, but let's go back to the original question. Can we leave the article out? My answer is yes. Now, like I said, some people are going to say, you're nuts, that's wrong, but I'm going to say yes. And here's why I'm going to say yes. As more and more people are not growing up with the language as their first language, they grow up speaking English, and now they're coming to my videos and they're learning Pennsylvania Dutch as a second language, or they're going to classes where they're learning Pennsylvania Dutch as a second language. Their English grammar and their English language is going to be the pressure on their brain as they're learning Pennsylvania Dutch. And we see that, and I see this all the time, that there are more and more Pennsylvania Dutch speakers, even older Pennsylvania Dutch speakers, that aren't using the article as much anymore. So if we go back to that original sentence, ich ken Dutchan or ich ken die Mary good, is it okay for me to say this? Ich ken John or ich ken Mary good? Again, I'm going to say absolutely. It's a preference choice. Is it wrong for me to say ich ken Dutchan or ich ken die Mary good? No. Is it wrong for me to say ich ken John or ich ken Mary good? No. Again, as you speak, are you going to be understood? Yes. If I was writing poetry, if I was writing a short story or something along those lines, maybe I would tend to say Dutchan or die Mary in my writing. And most of us do write more. We follow the rules more when we write than when we speak. That's just the way language works, right? That goes for our English as well. But in common conversation, am I going to say ich ken Dutchan gut, ich ken John gut? I think it varies. Sometimes the Dutchan will come out, sometimes it won't. That's me speaking. Go to the question, Wuhnt John in Bernville or Wuhnt der John in Bernville? Again, it's your own preference. Neither is wrong. Now, I will say, grammatically speaking, like if you were going to follow the grammar Bible, then yes, it should be Wuhnt der John in Bernville, or ich ken die Mary gut. However, and again, I probably will get some flack from people, but that's okay. I got broad shoulders. As long as you are out there learning and speaking, that's what I'm worried about. I'm not constantly worried about you making every single grammar, doing everything 100% grammatically correct. I teach high school German, and my goal, of course, with all of my students is that by the end of however many years of German they take, that they're at least able to speak German. If I have kids and I do have kids like this, I have students that are so worried about not making mistakes that it impedes their ability to speak. Instead of just speaking and practicing and making mistakes, they clam up. And learning a language, you can't be like that. You have to be willing to make mistakes. Now here we're talking about something that even if you do it, der John or just John, Yes, you're making technically a grammatical mistake. However, you will be understood, your point is getting across, and you're speaking Pennsylvania Dutch. That's what I'm worried about. Okay. So this is one of those, there's certain grammar rules that we can't break. And I would say, this is one where we'll bend this one. Conjugating verbs, forming the past tense, using correct word order. Those are things that I don't allow people to bend on. But this topic, bend away. You want to use the article? Go ahead. You don't want to use the article? Don't. Now, this is kind of another topic for probably a future video, but there is one instance where we do have to keep that article in front of the name, and that's when we're showing possession using the dative case. That's all I'm going to say about that. I'm not going to give you an example today. We can do that in some other video down the road. But if you are just normally speaking about a person, you have the option. Use the der or the d, or don't. It will not affect the meaning of whatever you're saying. And that's what's important. Are you being understood? Because if you're out there practicing and someone's understanding you, it's such a better experience for you as a speaker. You feel confident. You start to then push yourself a little bit farther. It's so frustrating if you're practicing and you're making mistakes and like big mistakes, and whoever you're trying to practice with and talking to can't understand you. We've all been there. Maybe if you've gone on a vacation to a country where they speak a foreign language and you got the phrase book on French and you practice, and you feel pretty good, and you get to Paris and you go to order your first meal and the waiter just looks at you like you're not even speaking French. That's extremely frustrating. So again, get out there and just practice. This is one of those rules I'm going to say. Bend away. You want to use the article? Use it. You don't? That's okay, as long as you're speaking Pennsylvania Dutch and practicing. That was a long video on a pretty short, basic question, but I like to reiterate this idea that, you're going to make mistakes. That's okay. Make mistakes. That's how you're going to learn. That's how you're going to get better. This is a mistake that isn't a mistake. How's that sound? You either use it or you don't. You're going to be understood either way. As long as you're not mixing up like the feminine one with a masculine name or the masculine one with a feminine name, but even then you're still going to be understood. If you would say, by mistake, dare Mary and D John, it's okay. Whoever you're speaking to will understand you. They might say, dare John and D Mary, and then you'd be like, oh yeah, of course, in that when you're in those early stages as you're learning this. But just keep practicing, okay? That's the main point of learning a language, period. I tell my students, don't be afraid to make mistakes. And you guys are, I look at you guys as my students. So I want you to go out there and make mistakes so that you learn the mistake, correct yourself, and then most likely you won't make the mistake again, or you won't make the mistake as often. Okay? All right. Whew. Sorry, got on my soapbox there as a language teacher, I guess. Or at least you see the insight into my philosophy of teaching foreign language anyway. If you have an idea for a future video, email me. My email address is at the end. Or if you have a question like this gentleman did about this grammar topic, please feel free to email me as well. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, what are you waiting on? Subscribe to the YouTube channel and you get an update every time a new video comes out. Also, share it, send it along to friends or someone you know who might be interested in learning Pennsylvania Dutch or learning about the Pennsylvania Dutch. We'll keep the videos coming as long as possible. But until next time, practice, practice, practice. Speak, 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 speak. And Mach Scoot.
Mach Scoot.